All right, hello. Welcome to day, I believe it is 8. I should know because of the date, but I will admit that I am filming some of these ahead of time because kids and school at the end of the month, they will be home and they are loud. So we gotta plan ahead. So day 8, painting Christmas lights, and I have done a lot of practices. These ones weren't finished, but there's some, a couple of different methods that I tried, and so we're just gonna kind of go through a few of these, what I think worked the most. I'll let that sit there. And before we go, I realize that a lot of these I'm not really going over anything. I'm kind of assuming that you kind of know what you're doing with the watercolor, and that might be the case, and it might not. One thing that I think works really, really well with the lights and creating the glow around the lights, like this one in particular is one of my favorites, is to do kind of a gradient wash type thing. So I want to make sure you guys know how to do that. And then we're going to do it on a smaller scale in the shape of the lights. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, so to get the glow, we can either, there's a few different options, and I was going to teach each different option, like doing them all through, but I think it might be better to just kind of practice and see which one feels the best for you, and then we'll go through and do our thing. So this is a scratch piece of paper that I have. It's Arches 100% cotton. And we're going to start with wetting our brush, tapping it off. I'm going to wet the space. And then since we're practicing for the glow, we're going to put our color, whatever color we want to use. I'm going to go with the yellow. We're going to get some yellow on our brush. We're going to put it in the center, nice and bright. I'm going to tap my brush off. Tap and then, or rinse my brush, tap, so it's mostly clean, and then I'm going to come kind of help spread some of that color out. And then I'm going to tap my brush again in my very clean water, and I'm just going to come around the glow and just extend that circle a bit. Okay. And so now that would be, our light would be here in the middle there. And then it kind of has a nice glow around the edges. And you want to make sure you extend it so that the color stops at some point. Otherwise it leaves a hard line. Another way we could do it is not to wet our paper. And I'm just going to do blue for this one. We kind of draw our light shape. A point. Rinse the brush a little, tap it, and then we're going to come over here, touch the edges of our light just slightly. We don't want to go into the middle. We don't want to go back and forth. We're just grabbing those edges and we're spreading out the color. We're going to rinse our brush, tap again, and then come a little bit further out. Rinse our brush, tap on the paper towel, and come out even further. Okay, and so for this, when you're tapping around the edges, you want to be careful. If you get too close to the edge and go into the middle, you can see this is kind of creating a bit of a bleed. My brush was more wet, and so there's a little lighter area and it's pushing the darker color further into the middle there, which is okay. It's just not typically the effect you want to go for, unless that's what you're trying to do. You need to just be aware of what causes bleeds, and it's just the variation in how the water on your brush. If you have more water on your brush and you're putting it to your paper, then the water is going to rush to the paper, and then when it rushes, it's going to create little bleeds there. But see, like this glow looks really, really nice, but eventually out here, there is a bit of a harsh line, which is okay if you don't mind that. One thing we can try to do is take plain clear water get our brush wet, tap it off a little bit, and then just go right where that edge is and try to spread out some of that color a bit more. But because this is wet and that's dry, it might cause some bleeds there too. We might have needed to wait a little bit longer on that. That's okay, we're just experimenting. It's fine. So, give me just a second. Sorry, I'm trying to look and see, but I do like the idea of the glows. It's just, I do think as far as having a glow and having it slowly get further out, it is better to wet the paper first with the solid white, not a dirty water. Solid white. Solid, like clear water, no color in it. Wet the paper. And then get the color that you want to use. I'm going to use red this time just because I'm trying to have some variety. We're going to do the color. You can even try to do like the shape of the light you are trying to create so you can see where it is. Rinse the brush. Add a little bit of that color there on the edges of where you just added color. Rinse your brush again and add a bit more. And actually, we really don't even need to add much other than completely rinsing and making sure that at the end here it's clear. And that is to try to prevent that darker line there. But if you want to add just a touch of lighter color, you can pick up a small bit of color around the edges just to help create that glow. Okay, so those are the samples and kind of the techniques for how to do this. I will say, like, one of my favorites was this one, and I just like how that glow looks. That was the one where I wet the paper and I painted in the light, and I just let it kind of dissipate and it went out on its own. Kind of like this one here and this one here. And then when this is done, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add the light. And so that, I think, gives the best effect. This one here, I did a different technique where I traced the line and then of where the light's going to be, and then I did the water over it, but only dropped in color around the edges and didn't touch the inside of the light. And I kind of like that sometimes, but sometimes it gives us really, really white space around the light. And I don't think that gives the idea that it's a light. It feels like something else. And so because I don't like that effect, that one wasn't my favorite. Technique. But this is one of those things where you kind of have to play around and see, because see, when you do the color, depending on, your water needs to be very, very clean, because you see there's this really, really light edge where the color stops, because the color went all the way to the edge. And it could be that I used some dirty water accidentally, but it does kind of affect the glow a bit, because it looks better here when there's no line. It just fades out than when that creates a water line. So my biggest tip when you're doing lights is to make sure you have at least one jar of completely clean water. And if it starts to get even a little bit dirty, replace it so that you don't get those lines. But let's go ahead, do the actual little project, which is just going to be basically a line like this. You could make it be a border if you want, which is kind of fun. Or you can make it go in different shapes. You could just do a really basic line across the middle and put like Merry Christmas if you're making like a card or something, however you want to do it. I usually do a little line and do little kind of curly cues as I'm making the line. Sometimes I like to double up, because I know a lot of times the strands, there's multiple layers. And so I'm just going to do a couple little lines. we can go over this with a pen or darker paint, depending on what color you want your wires to be, black, or I know some of them are dark green, so they match the tree. So it just depends. There we go. And you can use a kneaded eraser to lighten up your lines, especially if you're going to paint over them, or even if you trace them, unless you do it straight with your ink pen the first time, you can still, if your odds are you're going to miss the area slightly unless you're an expert tracer. And so you want to lighten up the lines anyway, because it might show through your painting. And once we add water to this, especially if we're doing like the method where we add the water, once there's water on there, it's not going to lighten up anymore. Like the pencil will be stuck. So you have to be very, very good at tracing over that. Okay, I'm just gonna mark a tiny bit of where I want my lights to go so I remember. It can be kind of tricky sometimes to remember where they go. And I'm gonna do one strand at a time and then mark them. All right, and I'm gonna paint these to do the glow. I wanna do the wet spot. I'm gonna wet my paper around the first light first. And then I'm going to get the color. I'm not going to go move on to the other one yet because I don't want this to dry too much. And we want to make sure there's a good sheen there of the water. We don't want puddles, but we want a nice sheen. And then I'm going to take this. And I think the method I'm going to go with is I'm going to just kind of trace where I want the light to go. I'm going to leave it a little lighter in the middle there. I'm going to rinse my brush slightly, but I'm going to help move some of this color out. Just a touch in that circular motion. And I'm actually going to get really, really clean water with my bigger brush. And I'm just going to extend that wet area a tiny bit more to try not to get a line, sorry. All right, I'm going to get some wet paint, I'm going to wet my brush, clean water, and I'm going to do this one. I'm going to do kind of a circle because I feel like with a light, it's kind of a circular area, the glow. And then I'm going to get some green. And again, I'm just going to do kind of a bit of an outline of where the light's going to go. It's okay if it fills it all in. I'm not super worried about it. I'm going to tap my brush a little bit just to get some of the color off, but I still have some color on my brush to help extend it a little further. And then yeah, I'm just helping it along so there's just a nice hint of glow. Again, I'm going to do a little bit where I extend because I don't know if my clean water went far enough to avoid a line. Take that clean water, do this side here, extend it farther than I think it needs to be. Okay, and then, sorry, make sure it covers where that light connects. Okay, I'm gonna get some red, and I'm gonna mark my light. I'm gonna wet the brush, not in my clean water. I'm gonna go to one of my other waters. I have at least 2 waters at all times, if I can help it. And see, I'm extending some of that red out, but it's not as bright. Rinse my brush again, and I'm gonna kind of pull some of that color again to create a kind of a gradient effect, but I want to get all the way out to where the glow is. And then I'm going to wet my brush and create this wet area over here for the blue light. Pick up some blue paint. Oops, I just put that in my clean water, so I'm going to have to go change my water here in a second. See, if I don't clear my throat, I can't talk. Okay, clean out my brush with that, pull out some of that color, just just slowly painting kind of in that direction where I want the glow to go. Rinse my brush a little bit more, tap it off, and then pull more color to the edges of the glow. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to let that dry for a minute. We don't really need to, and you're not going to notice that I'm gone, but I'm just going to go make sure. And you can tell it's not, this is my water. It's still fairly clean, but there's hints of color in it. So I'm going to go dump it and get fresh water so that when I'm doing my glow, I don't have lines. So if you need to do that as well, now's a good time. Just pause your video and then we'll pick it right back up. Okay, I am back with my clean water. We're going to let those dry before we work on any more layers of the lights, and we're just going to go down and do another row of lights. I've been going kind of in order, but I don't really love how it looks, just if I'm trying to create something. So I think I'm going to go as if it's like zigzagging, and so I'm going to go yellow, red, or yellow, green, red, blue down here and go back and forth. And so I'm going to figure out where I want my lights to go on this one. I don't want to put it on top here, otherwise it's going to hit that one. So I'm going to go at the bottom, top, bottom, top. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to get plain, clean water. I'm going to wet the space. Get my other tiny brush. I'm going to grab the yellow. Nope, don't do that. And I am just going to draw the shape of the light. I'm going to clean off my brush a bit, dab it so that it's not too wet, and I'm going to pull some of that color out very carefully. I'm going to dab it again and pull the color out a little bit more. And over here, as you get to this edge, it should be barely there. Just a hint of color. I'm going to switch to get clean water. Fill that space. And I'm going to get the green. Draw the general shape of where my light's going to go. Now this one is, I think it might have been a little wet, more wet, but even still, it's going to, I dabbed my water. I'm going to spread out a little bit of that green. It might create a nice glow. I'm actually going to go right back in real quick and add a tiny bit more because I lost some of that. And I'm going to spread it out just a bit more. And the other thing you can do, if your glow doesn't go very far, kind of like how it did with this one, is you can make your light just a little bit smaller. So it's lower, smaller than your glow. All right, and now we're going to use clean water again for down here. We're going to do the red. I'm doing kind of a circular shape for my water. Doesn't matter too terribly much, I don't think, but just in case. And we're going to do the red shape. And you could fill in this color, it's up to you. We're going to go over it again in a bit. But yeah, fill out that color. Tap it again. Pull out that color a bit more. You want it to get to the point where it's barely there, because the glow of the light is going to be strongest near the light and it's going to fade away. And finally, we'll do the blue on this side. Wet the brush, dab it off a little, and then pull that color out just a bit further. You don't want to go all the way to the edge of the wet space you already did, because then that will create that line, remember. Okay, and now we could go again. I think for now, just to keep it short, I'm gonna leave that line. I'm just gonna have the top 2 lines. I'm gonna go ahead and erase that because it hasn't gotten wet. And I'm gonna just, do that because I wanna make sure we get through everything. This top area should be mostly dry now that I started it quite a while ago. So I'm gonna go back through, do my second layer. This is gonna be wet on dry now because the paper is dry. I'm just gonna fill in my lights. I'm not filling completely. I'm doing kind of an outline-ish, leaving that area, and then I'm going to pull that color down. And I might even lift some color here, wet your brush a little bit, dab it off, and then just kind of brush some of that color back out, because with the light it's typically darker around the edges, and it'll be really light in the middle there where the actual bulb is. Okay, I'm going to go back around and do the same thing. I'm going to do green. I'm kind of tracing it, and I'm filling in some of it but not all of it, wetting my brush, and then I'm going to pull that color down into the middle of the bulb there. That's a little lighter than I want it to be, so I'm going to grab a little more color and tap it in. And if I'm still not happy with it, I can lift up some of that color by wetting my brush and just kind of lifting, especially here at the base. Okay. Let me do the red. Trace a bit. Rinse my brush, pull that color in and down. Okay, and then same with the blue. Well, that one I pulled the color in, and that one kind of filled it. It's all fairly close to the same shade. And so I'm going to wet my brush, tap it on a paper towel, and then I'm going to press and lift some of this color out so that it's a bit lighter there in the middle. All right, let's keep going around. Do the same thing to all these other ones. We want a nice bright yellow in the middle there. Okay, we'll do the green and low. I always run out of the green because I mix it. Can't really just grab it. Okay, and I want to make sure I still have a decent amount of glow on there. Spread that around. Do the red. Rinse, dab, and then spread that color a bit. So it's hopefully still a bit lighter inside there. Okay, and then the last one, we'll do the blue, and then we'll just do those last little bits of the details. See, that one's a little bit lighter there, but I still might lift a tiny bit because I just like that effect. Okay. So there's that. I'm going to show you the two different methods for the wires. We can either do pen. You want it to be one that can handle being wet and isn't going to blend and bleed unless you're done. If you're done and your paper's completely dry, it doesn't really matter. If you might add more to it, you want to make sure that it can handle that. So this top one, I will do the pen. And I'm going to try to kind of trace a bit, but I'm also just kind of going for it and doing whatever. And now because it is watercolor, it's not as smooth as it would be. You could use hot press paper if you wanted it to be more smooth. I like the rough texture of the cold press paper. In most cases, I guess if I was going to be writing a lot, I might reach more for the cold press or hot press, but I haven't experimented with that much. And then here I'm just adding the little bases to the lights. Okay, so there's that one using pen. The other option is to use your fine liner and use whatever color. I'm going to do the dark green because typically a lot of lights have the wire as that dark green so it matches your tree. And you'll just use it, pressing very lightly. Like the pen, it is a little bit trickier to maneuver. And see, this is why I erased my lines as much as I could, because I knew I wouldn't really be able to trace them very well, especially if you do it with the brush like this. And then I'm just going to go over it again, kind of purposefully squiggling and having them go different ways, because I don't know about you guys, but I swear the different layers of wire always separate on our lights. So there that is. Okay, and then just same as before, create your thing. And I will say this one got like a little further away than I would like. I should have been closer to the wire, or maybe I should have drawn my wire closer. Pay attention to that when you're doing it. But there are our Christmas lights, and they have a nice little glow. If you wanted to, you could add a little bit of highlight to some of the lights. I know usually like glass things have a little bit of a white highlight. You can use a white pen. Just add like a little dab here, there, just to make it look like it's, you know, a light bulb and it has reflections. In this case, I think the pen works fine. You don't need to use the bleed-proof white or anything, but if you wanted to, you could. But that just adds a little something to it. But there you have it, Christmas lights. See you guys tomorrow for day 9. Is it 9? It's today 9. Day 9. See you tomorrow for day 9. Bye, y'all.